threat, which is still out there, to the caravan, which is also still out there and is heading towards this border. The feds have their hands full. A short time ago, I sat down with our Homeland Security Secretary, Kirstjen Nielsen, to discuss all of that. Watch. Secretary Nielsen, thank you very much for being with us at the Yuma border sector. Obviously, there's so much attention being paid to the border right now. The president just tweeting a short while ago today to those in the caravan, turn around. We are not letting people into the United States illegally. Go back to your country. And if you want to apply for citizenship, do so like millions of others are doing. And to that end, we're also hearing that there's going to be 800 somewhere in that neighborhood, military added to the border. Can you confirm that?
Sure. What we have done is we've been in close conversations with DOD, which is a great partner of ours, as you know. We work on defense support to civil authorities. We do hurricane response together. So what we've asked them to do is help to bolster our capabilities. So we've asked for some air support, for some logistics, some planning, vehicle barriers, engineering, ways in which we can make sure that I can protect my officers and agents as well as the ports of entry themselves.
So in terms of military capability, will they be armed, these 800?
All of the rules of engagement are up to Secretary Mattis. So we make the request for what capabilities we need, and then the Department of Defense determines how they can meet our request.
So how can they bolster security at the border? They can't go into Mexico, correct?
Yes, they can, right, without further agreement, further discussion, correct.
So, but once someone sets foot on this side of the border, we can't touch them anyway, correct?
Once they're on this side of the border, what we intend to do, and I think the president's been very clear, if you do not have a legal right to come to this country and you come as part of this caravan and you come in our country, you will be returned home.
So the rules of engagement are what?
The rules of engagement for us are the same as they've always been. For DOD, we're still in discussions and we're working them out. We're waiting to see what the caravan's going to do, what numbers we're looking like, where they're headed. Each port is different, as you know. You've been to one port, port, so the needs will be different. But what we want to do is bolster it. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that what we saw in Guatemala, between the Guatemala and Mexican border, we do not see here. So we're bringing everything we can to protect the ports of entry and all of the people who work at them.
Is there any scenario under which if people force their way across the border, they could be shot at?
We do not have any intention right now to shoot at people. They will be apprehended, however. But I also take my officer and agent, their own personal safety extraordinarily seriously. They do have the ability, of course, to defend themselves.
So if shot at, they would shoot back?
No, I think we'd have to work through that. But I want to make it very clear we will absolutely not tolerate violence against Border Patrol in this situation. These are dedicated men and women risking their lives every day. I will not tolerate Mexicans or anybody else acting in a violent way towards our men and women on the border.
I think a lot of people don't know how many agencies, how many departments are under your jurisdiction as the Secretary of Homeland Security. It includes counterterrorism, protection of national leaders, cyber, aviation security, protection from biological and chemical weapons, border security, disaster response, including all of the response to hurricanes, which has kept you very busy recently. But with this issue of these pipe bombs coming through to Democratic leaders and to CNN, can you update us on the investigation into who that pipe bomber might be?
Sure. So FBI has lead on this investigation. We work with them as part of the interagency task force every day, but we're working with them very closely right now. The Secret Service has taken additional measures to be sure to protect all of their protectees, which some of the 10 packages went to protectees, as you know. We have our Federal Protective Service also within the Department of Homeland Security, so we've added additional guidance for federal buildings for protection. And then just in terms of people, places, and things, we've put out alerts to the governors, Homeland Security advisors, what to look for. Here's what we know. Be prepared. Everyone eyes open. Support suspicious activity.
What about the investigation into this individual, who this is? What do we know about that today?
So FBI is tracking that. I don't want to in any way hinder their investigations. I'm not going to say more about an active investigation, but rest assured, the president appropriately directed everyone within the United States federal government to work on this as quickly and expeditiously as possible to bring these people or person to justice.
There's some indications that the packages came from Florida. Can you confirm that?
I can confirm that there were some reports, there were some leads. I think the FBI is tracking them all down wherever they take them. So as you know, some of the packages went through the mail. They originated, some of them from Florida. So that was an obvious lead to pursue. And then in terms of what the FBI is doing, again, would defer to their active investigation.
Do you feel confident with the amount of evidence that they have, the different videotapes, you know, some of the messages, that they will be able to find this person relatively quickly?
I'm confident that this person or people will be brought to justice, absolutely.
Okay. In terms of the president's own strong language, which has been criticized, and some have suggested that it's created an environment that led to this pipe bomb, to these pipe bomb threats that were sent out to all of these people. What do you say to that?
I say that I think what's important to recognize is any act of violence, any threat of violence cannot be tolerated by this country. And the way we look at this at DHS, you know, we've expanded our efforts. Hate is hate, violence is violence. We track down all instances of that wherever they appear, whatever the motive is, whether it's political or not political. But to me, this is a clear attempt to undermine our democracy and our democratic processes. So we can't stand for it. We must bring these people to justice as quickly as possible.
So in terms of the president's language, would you agree that it's been a contributing factor?
I think yesterday he made clear that what he wants and expects the federal government to do is to find these people, and that's what we're going to do. So taking direction directly from him to do all we can with the Secret Service and other parts of DHS.
You took some heat for implementing the zero-tolerance policy that led to the separation of families at the border. How many children are still in custody right now and not reunited with their families, and where are they?
So there's a few hundred. The number that is left, what we have done is we've been working in very close coordination with the court. Of that number, the vast majority of their parents have already been removed, were removed prior to the court injunction. And the parents now, 3 different times, have said they do not want to be reunited.
Really?
So they're not reunited. The kids will stay in HHS care, just as our laws require, and HHS is working hard to find them sponsors and to find a family that does want to be reunited with them.
Incredible. How are they being cared for? Where are they staying? What is that like for them?
So they have HHS runs the shelters for the children. And by the way, I'd pause here to say, you know, we have 13,000 children in the care of HHS right now who came here unaccompanied, whose parents sent them at the hands of strangers, and in some cases criminals or smugglers. And that is an extraordinarily dangerous journey that no system should support. So let me pause there and say that.
13,000, not as part of what came through during the
13,000
over the last several years. They're in custody.
50,000 last year were sent here unaccompanied by their families. 13,000 are still in HHS care.
And what is that care like?
HHS goes above and beyond. I mean, they get full health care, full dental, they get mental, they get education, they get playtime, they get skill training. They're able to talk to any of their family members who are in this country or in another country. They talk to the consulate. They talk to if they need any additional special needs. They are treated with the utmost respect and utmost care. They are above and beyond standards of most all of our states in terms of how they care for those children.
Do you think that the criticism was unjustly placed on you? Do you think it belongs more with these parents who you're now saying in some cases didn't even want their children back?
I think that as the Secretary of Homeland Security, I will continue to enforce the laws of this country. I expect the people who work at the Department of Homeland Security to do the same. That's the oath that we took. I do think the system is broken. I've spent a lot of time working with Congress, but I've also spent a lot of time talking to the governments of Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Mexico, and asking them, please, better message what this is like. We have 30% of all women that take this flow, make this migration, sexually abused. 70% of all migrants who take this journey are a victim of violence. Girls over 9, we have to give pregnancy tests to just to care for them because the abuse on this trip is so horrible, so heart-wrenching.
You've seen a tremendous spike since the zero-tolerance policy ended.
Yes.
Of people who bring in a child.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Fraud is through the roof. Those of us who have visited in the region are told absolutely that it is advertised as a way to get into the United States, to take a child and bring them here. As part of this recent migration, in talking with some of my foreign partners, they report kidnappings, flat out smugglers and criminals picking up children to try to come into the United States to take advantage of our loopholes. But we have 40% more families at the end of this year who have crossed illegally than we have ever had in the history of our country. Right now, we apprehend within 3 days the number of families that we can eventually remove in a year.
So you've had such an increase of families. It sounds to me like you're saying because you ended the zero tolerance policy, the White House ended it, then it became clear that if you came in as a family, you wouldn't be separated, you would be allowed to stay. So people, you're claiming, are now finding ways to come in with a child. Do you think if you had stuck with the zero tolerance policy longer, that message would have been
the smugglers are
a better way to combat the problem?
Yeah, the smugglers are smart. I mean, the part that I cannot, through any executive means, change is the Flores settlement, which limits the time that we can keep a family together to 20 days. And the smugglers know that. So even whatever the case is and whatever we do on the border, and again, as you know, that applied to anybody who illegally crossed, the smugglers are still saying, if you go, worst case scenario, you're going to be in detention for 20 days, and then you'll be let go.
All right. One question before we wrap up this segment. There's always political intrigue in the White House, in the West Wing, and a lot written about it. One of those stories was that there was a big dust-up between John Kelly, who used to be the head of Homeland Security before you were appointed to that, and he became chief of staff, that he and John Bolton had this big argument at the White House, and that part of it was over you, that John Bolton was criticizing the job that you were doing at the border. Is that true?
Not only do I have no reason to believe that story, but everyone that I've asked, including all involved, assure me that it did not occur. Ambassador Bolton has a big job to do. He and I work very closely together. I am always open to anyone's suggestions. This is a very complex topic, but I think we all want to solve it. We all want border security. There's nothing more basic that a country should and must offer its people than border security.
So you don't think that John Bolton is in the president's ear saying, we're not tough enough on the border, you got to make a change at Homeland?
I do not think he is, no.
And what has the president said to you recently about how you're doing at your job?
So I talk to him probably once or twice a day about border security and immigration in general. Everything's on the table. We're talking about every possible way in which we can adjust the flows. And, it's important for the viewers and Americans in general to understand how much the flows have changed. I mean, if we think back to 2000, it was primarily Mexicans, about 98%. Right. Now it's about 60% Central Americans. And the reason that matters is because the law is different for Central Americans. It used to be that 95% of people, if they didn't have a legal right to be here, we could repatriate them within hours. Now it's within years, at best case scenario. If they're not detained, it's well over 3,000 days. So a lot has changed with the court cases and the law. It's sort of like having both my hands tied behind my back. I still have the same mission, but Congress has prohibited us from executing it.
All right, we're going to get more into those loopholes when we come back.
Sure.